With all the stuff that's happening in the world today with the coronavirus outbreak, all the stuff that's going on with the media, it's making a lot of people really concerned about what's going to happen. You know, who's in charge? Who's going to make us do this? What are the new laws going to be? Are we going to be allowed to do this? Are we going to be forced to do this? And so on. So there's this element of fear of our rights that I'm seeing around the internet. People are fearing if their rights may be abused in the near future. So I wanted to talk about Capricorn, which is the sign of that which grants the power to the rulers. Okay, I wanted to talk about this sign so that you can understand how the power structure actually works. The wonderful thing about astrology is that it's a perfect model of how the world works. If we study astrology, we understand how things work. Now, what happens when we start watching the media and seeing what's happening and people saying they're going to do this and people hoping this will happen and all the chaos of information out there, some of it which is very daunting and can feel very power-robbing, it's important to get back to ground zero and remember how does it really work. You know, with all the stuff going on, a lot of people are feeling very helpless and powerless. Same, like we're children. You know, some people, as we go through these changes, may feel like children, powerless, hopeless, like there's despair. But that's not true. We have power. Every one of us always has power. And it's so easy to forget that. It almost seems like we're designed to forget it and then we remember it. Okay? And every time we remember it, there's a shift in what happens in the world and how the world's being ran. And that all happens because of this sign of Capricorn, the sign that grants the power. Okay? Now, Capricorn is the 10th sign in the zodiac. The 10th sign, or the 10th house, like in your chart, is the chart of the ruler, the power. Now, in the zodiac, the 10th sign, Capricorn, is the sign of that which grants the power. So who has the power in the world? It was granted to someone at some point. Okay? It was always granted by Saturn, though. Now, who is Saturn? Saturn's the common man. Saturn's the common man. It's the common man that always grants the power to the ruler. And a lot of you are saying, oh, that's not true. So-and-so went over there with a bunch of guns and forced their way into power. Yes. And that was the common man determining who was in power and who was in charge as well. So when I explain all this, you'll see how it works. So don't get impatient and say this doesn't make any sense if it sounds that way so far. Saturn's the common man, and he rules the natural 10th house of the zodiac, the house of power. Okay? So what happens is, who's ever in charge, however type of government we have, at some point, that was put into power by the common man. Like, let's take a democracy. Okay, it's easy to understand that one. In a democracy, we say the majority wins. We vote, the majority, rules. Whoever has the most votes or the most electorate votes, if it's done on that. However the majority is counted, the power is given to the most people. That's the idea of democracy. Okay? 50 people, 70 people. 70 people have more power than 50 people simply because they're more numerous. And the idea is every person's equally valuable. Therefore, if more people vote for this than this, it goes with the more. Because everyone is equal. So we put this scale of who's going to win. Who's going to be in charge. What law is going to be passed. And we put the for and the against. And whichever part of the scale weighs more, that side wins. And every person's worth the same amount. Okay? Now, that's real simple and easy to understand. It's easy to say, yeah, in a democracy, the power choices are made by the people. Okay? But it's really that way in every government. Let's take a dictatorship, one that's a little more difficult to understand. In a dictatorship, the more powerful people decide who's going to win. Who are the more powerful people? The ones with the biggest guns. So if you've got 1 million people over here with bows and arrows, and 10,000 people over here with machine guns and tanks and grenades, they're the more powerful group. And so they're going to dictate the policy. But it's still given by the people. The more powerful people, in this case, each person's power count, how strong they are to make things, to determine the ruler, is based on their capacity to kill. That's all. So in the democracy, every person has a value based on, I am one person, I have a value of 1. In a dictatorship, everyone has a value of, my value to influence my world is based on my capacity to kill, how big my guns are. Okay? But it's still, the power is given by the people. There's not a single person that can show up and just say, hey, I'm going to rule this country, and there's nothing you can do about it, right? I mean, maybe Superman could, right? Because you can shoot Superman with bullets, and it won't hurt him. And Superman can just fly really fast and mow 1,000 people down in a second, and then burn the rest of the people up with his eyes. Well, he's one person, but he's more powerful, as he has more capacity to kill than 20 million people. So even then, it would be based on a dictatorship idea that the more powerful to kill is how much power a person has to influence their world. But Superman doesn't exist. In a real dictatorship, the dictator has his guys, his army, who's got the bigger weapons, and they're going to choose to determine the policy. And but those guys, anytime they want, they could all just go shoot the dictator. Why don't they? Because they chose that dictator. For one reason or other, they've chosen to put that person at their, on the throne that they want to see occupied. It's always the people, okay? It's just the strength, the value of a person's measured differently. In a dictatorship, the value of a person is how much you can destroy. So, but still, one single dictator can't show up and say, this is how it's going to be. He has to have enough people with enough guns to be more powerful than everyone else. Okay? So it's just how much power each person has to influence the choices of the nation that's different in a dictatorship. In a monarchy, it's the same idea. Now, monarchies are not very prevalent anymore, but of course they used to be the cornerstone of human society. In a monarchy, the idea is that people believe that this person has a right to rule. There's a belief that they're noble, they're from this lineage. This person proved that they could lead us. They demonstrated it. Most kingships occurred when somebody at some point in the long ago past proved their capacity to rule. And then after that, their offspring were thought to be born with the capacity to rule. Sadly, they were not always born with any capacity to rule, but that belief was there. So in a monarchy, the power, the ruling power, is chosen based on the faith that people put in the ruler. I believe that this person has the right to rule or the capacity to rule. It's really based on belief. And the more people who believe in a particular person determine who's going to be king, ultimately. And so if we look at England, like in all their days of wars, the wars they had in England for the monarchy, for the throne. And we see during these wars, it's not like one team had all the one side had all the big guns and other people were throwing rocks. No, they were militarily wise, they were equivalently equipped. What the determining factors were who people swore their allegiance to. Which king did they swear their allegiance to? Who were they going to throw their lives away for, basically, Who did they believe had a greater right to rule? All right? And so in a monarchy, the leader's chosen based on who people believe have the right to rule, based on some cultural idea of this gives the person the right to rule. This makes them better than us and therefore have the right to rule. It's different than a democracy. It's similar though. See, in a monarchy, there's this idea this person is better than us to rule. Where in a democracy, it's like any one of us blokes can rule equally well. Any one of us could do it, given the chance and the education to do it. But who do we want? Who does the majority back? So there's a subtle difference there. But you can see the power always lies in the hands of the people. And we forget this. We always forget this, And so we always come to points in history, in every nation, where people start feeling like they have no control over their lives. They forget. Go look back in history of when your government was founded. Go look at French. the French democracy. How did that start? That's when the people decided that, wait a minute, we don't believe in monarchy anymore. And they went and killed a bunch of monarchs. Okay? They killed the nobility in the late 1700s in France. The people decided that, you know. So you see the beginning of our modern French nation, the government of that nation was chosen in the late 1700s. Okay? And if we look at American history, we can see how the government we have today was chosen by the people who said, screw King George, you know? So this is what happens. Changes happen when people wake up and remember, wait a minute, we're the ones who granted the power in the first place. Look back in any country and see when there was a power shift. Who really granted the power? You know, who granted the communism to China? Mao Zedong and the hordes of people who backed him. You know, without those hordes of people, China would be a completely different country today. It's like that for every country. So if you're losing hope and you feel like, oh, the powers that be can just do whatever they want to my life, no. Go remember, go look at the founding of your country and see how it's always the people who determine the rulers. All right? It's always the more powerful group of people who determine the rulers. And when a country remembers that, when a dissatisfied country remembers that, like the French peasants, the American settlers, when they realize that, then there's hell to pay, right? Then there's no stopping them. And historically, you look at every country. Why was there a revolution? Because it got to a point where the people realized, wait a minute, we're the ones who decided in charge. You know, no one above us decides, we decide. It's always we, it's always Saturn, the common man. It's interesting, Capricorn rules the knees. It's all about getting on your knees. In a democracy, I want to start with the democracy. In the monarchy, it's obvious. You bend the knee. You get on your knee and you bow your allegiance to the king, the person you believe is better than you and more suited to rule you. Okay? You get on your knees. In a dictatorship, you have the bigger guns and you put the opposition on their knees, right? And in democracy, the hard-working person, which is the average person's a hard-working person, which means he symbolically has to get on his knees to do his hard work, whether he's doing farm work, cleansing work, construction work. You're on your knees a lot, you know? So every government is determined by who gets on their knees. Capricorn, okay? It's all about the knees, okay? So it's just kind of interesting how that symbolism really carries all the way through. And Mars, of course, is exalted in Capricorn. You know, the power, the overseer, the one who's going to make decisions. It's exalted in Capricorn. And it's always the common people who dictate that. But then they forget, okay? And they start blindly following, blindly leading, blindly going along, not staying informed and getting lost. Okay? And when they're pacified, they forget. Then they just let the rulership do its own thing. That's shown by the sun, the ruler, being in, you know, an enemy sign when it's in Capricorn. Okay? It's so easy when we're not paying attention, not being vigilant, to just let the rulers do what they want. If it's not impacting our life in a big way, we don't care. And it's been that way throughout history. That's why in Rome they had gladiators, because it gave people something to focus on, something to appease them with, so the government could pretty much sort of do what they wanted. Okay? So, you know, but that never lasts. Eventually there's always a time where people go, wait a minute, I don't like this. Who's the ones who got that power in the first place? It was us. And then we have a change. You saw a little of this during the Vietnam War in America, where there was just, you know, there was protests all around the country about the Vietnam War, and that the people of Vietnam did not want to be involved in Vietnam, and so on. We're even seeing a little of this now where people are protesting lockdown. People are like, wait a minute, you know, we're the ones who decide, you know. We don't want to be in lockdown. So when things get scary, when things start feeling unfair to a dramatic degree, that's when the people start saying, wait a minute, you know, we're the ones who give the power. And so I think it's important to remember when we're at these times where there's these possibilities of our rights being taken away, forced vaccinations, vaccine ID cards, who knows what else, the media is possibly talking about, or that we hear about in the media. Our health not being being something we have permission to make choices on. Those types of things, when they're really coming stuck in our face like they are right now with this little epidemic we're having, can cause a lot of feeling of powerlessness. But it's not true. It's the people who are always going to choose. Now, what happens is, and what has happened, people stop paying attention because it's not important enough to them. The people are down on their knees doing their work. We got to get through our lives. We got to have a little R&R at the end of the day, But there's a point where things get to where they're staring a person in the face and they're like, wait a minute, do I want to live this way or not? And that's always the time where people make a shift. So what I'm saying is, you have nothing to fear about unfair governments in the long term. You don't. In the short term, yeah. And the short term usually creeps up on us. And we go, wait a minute, some things are kind of sucking here, Some things don't seem fair anymore. But there's always a point where they're glaringly unfair. And if you look at history, when things become glaringly unfair, that's when the people remember Capricorn. Wait a minute, we're the one that put these blokes in power in the first place. What we built, we can change. And so, I think it's important, and the reason I wanted to give this talk for those people who are a little nervous or apprehensive about what we may or may not be forced to do in the future as a result of this virus, to remember that we decide. If you're in a democracy, you decide because, you have the power to vote. The majority will win. You'll have to live with the majority. You always have to go with the majority of power. If you're living in a dictatorship, you have to go with the majority of who has the biggest guns. And maybe the people carrying the biggest guns now go, wait a minute, we don't want to keep carrying the guns for this side. This is bullshit. That happens too. That's why within dictatorships, you see dictators being overthrown by other dictators, because the army, the people carrying the guns themselves go, screw this. We're the ones who decide, not the guy we raised as dictator 20 years ago, And now we want it to be different. So remember, the power is always in the people. So the best thing to do always is to stay informed, communicate, share, and, just be informed and informed in a healthy level, observe what's really happening. And there's always a point when things become absolutely unfair that there's always some change that happens eventually. It's happened in every culture. Doesn't matter what condition a government puts the people in. One day the people always remember the rule of Capricorn, and that's, they decide who's in charge. Okay? So each of us has value. In our culture, we have value to choose the people who, who are the leaders. Okay? The spokespeople, ideally, the overseers. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Mars is the overseer. He's the person who looks to make sure everything gets done that was agreed upon to get done. Okay? The people give the power, and the overseer says, okay, I'll get this mission done. That's how we really need to look at our rulers, that we give them the power, and they're the overseer, the manager, of that big project, the person who can get it done. And that's all they are. And people always realize that truth, that they give the power. So we got nothing to worry about except the friction that builds up if things do become unfair. That's a very apprehensive time. And if you study history, you'll see the time leading up to big changes in history. All this apprehension of things building up and people slowly realizing that they have all the power. But there's a state where it always begins with feeling powerless and unable, like a 3-year-old child trying to figure out how to survive in a world that they don't understand. But that passes. As things become more obvious, as information gets more clear, as people get confronted with unfairness, they always take their power back. Okay? So remember that as you see some of these crazy media stories that are coming up now about what may happen. It's only going to happen if the people allow it to happen. Okay? And we're at a point in history now where so much stuff is happening that's waking so many people up. People are spending time at home getting informed because they can't go to work. All the football games, sporting events are canceled. So the games that keep people occupied, they have to find other sources of entertainment, which is information these days. So people are learning more and more. And, it's a very wonderful thing. But yes, there's a lot of people are feeling this apprehension of dread. Oh, the powers that be are going to screw us. Yeah, they'll screw you until you realize they're screwing you. And when you realize, when enough people realize they're being screwed, that's when it changes big time. So we got nothing to worry about, We got nothing to worry about in the long term. We just have to live moment by moment in the short term as wisely as possible. And the long term will resolve itself, okay? This is really how Capricorn's every man's friend, by choosing the leaders. Now, if Leo had been on the 10th house, we'd be in trouble, right? Then there could be people who had such power, they could just show up and say, I'm king, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's not like that, though. It's Capricorn that grants the power. Okay, thank you.